captains, air traffic controllers, airport and airline managers, everyone here to lend a helping hand to those that are coming up through aviation, tips and tricks, or just something fun to watch for our aviators. And today we've got a great guest, someone that I've had the privilege, the honor to know now for about 7-8 years, Captain Steven Yoo. Yeah, it's been that long. I remember you visiting us at our old building at Opa-locka Airport. Wayman Aviation's been there for 34 years. That building's not even there anymore. It got knocked down. That's how long ago we met you there. But Steven, please introduce yourself.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steven Yoo. I'm first officer at American Airlines. I'm sure I've got a chance to meet a lot of you, especially those of you in the South Florida area. And I've been helping different organizations, especially all the new wannabe airline pilots, been helping out, mentoring them, coming up with something big here pretty soon. We'll talk about that later on, but welcome.
Absolutely. Welcome, Steven. So this is always a special one. We like having a variety of guests here, and you kind of encompass a few different things that we like to. So clearly you're an accomplished pilot, now flying for the biggest airline, American Airlines, right? I met you as a recruiter for SkyWest Airlines, a regional, so you know that world very well. And airline recruiting, helping so many pilots kind of reach their goals, their aspirations of being a pilot. And also just through a lot of the organizations, OBAP, LPA, the Women in Aviation, and you recently told me about the Asian Pilots Association.
Yes, it seems like there's a new nonprofit coming up every year or so, helping out the pilot community, especially student pilots. And there's a new one, the PAPA. Papa. Yeah, that's a new one. And I've been a member of that since the beginning, and been active with all the nonprofits here in South Florida. Yeah, so it's been an exciting ride for the past couple of years.
It has, and it's been a heck of a ride. There was a lot of going uphill, and then there's some downhill as well, and now we're kind of leveling off here through the turbulence. But before we get into that, I always like to kind of just go way back, right? Like, how did you get interested in aviation?
I still have the memories of being about 7, 8 years old. And on the playground, I'm from Montreal, Canada originally, and we used to have recess, I think around 10 o'clock in the morning, and that park that we play in would be on final for runway 28 in Montreal's Dorval Airport. So, nice. The planes were really low. It was kind of scary to think about now. They were only about 1,000 feet above us, but I just remember being mesmerized by these giant airliners coming in. Seemed like every minute, and I don't know what it was. And then I got, of course, the classic, got to see the movie Airplane.
Yeah, hilarious.
And that was it. I made a decision that young that I was going to be an airline pilot.
Excellent. In grade school. Now, any friends or family in the world of aviation, or were you the first?
None. Didn't know a pilot. Didn't know how to become a pilot. I think the only real contact I had was Airplane. That was it. I had to watch. I probably watched that 100 times.
You always hear about Top Gun and how influential Top Gun was in getting a lot of people into the world of aviation. But I think Airplane is under the radar. Like, everyone loves Airplane.
I'm surprised that it's not being promoted more. As something, as a tool that really got kids interested in aviation. I thought it was funny, and my parents didn't. They thought I was a little too young to be watching that movie. There was a brief stint of nudity here and there, but at least it was aspiring for something.
Sure. That one's due for a reboot. And if they're going to remake movies, that'd be a great one to remake. I don't know who would take place of Mel Brooks at this point, but that's hilarious. So for those of you that are just joining us now, as we have usually we've got people kind of coming in as they see it's available. Let us know in the chat where you're from, right? If you're international, what country you're from. If you're here domestic, let us know what city you're from. We always like to kind of hear where people are from, so we can kind of maybe tailor our questions and answers your way. Same thing on the Facebook Live in the comments. You can put what country or city you're from. Yeah. Steven, I think, has been all around the U.S. as an airline recruiter. I've been in many, many countries internationally as a flight school recruiter. So it's very likely we've been in your backyard, or we will be at some point soon. So let us know where you're from.
Yeah.
Right away, we got people coming from Dubai, Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami. Yeah, I'd love to hear where that's from. So, so let's keep it going there. So in grade school, you decided to become a pilot. How long until you actually had like your first discovery flight or that first captain talk to you or something like that?
You know, there was somebody in my neighborhood, a neighbor that was a pilot, and my parents had a fruit and vegetable store, and they still do up in Canada. And I remember this customer coming in saying, if you really want to become an airline pilot, you have to wait till you're 16. And that's when you can become a student. So the rules are a little different in the United States and Canada. But I remember on my 16th birthday, I looked up flight school. I had no
Nice.
idea how to get there, but I knew there was a bus and subway system. And I got on the bus, got on the subway, and that whole journey took
Nice.
3 hours
Whoa.
to get to this flight school. And yeah, I showed up and I started talking to the chief pilot. And I said, listen, I don't want to fly these little planes here. I want to fly a jumbo jet. And he's like, okay, settle down.
Yeah.
But that was the beginning of it. And I think the very next week, I depleted my savings, which was, I think, $70 at the time, and took my
That's a
first
fortune
flight.
for a 16-year-old.
I mean, especially back in 1992,
Yeah.
it's probably like $5,000 today, right? So that was it. That was my first flight. And yeah, the rest is history. It just, it was one challenge after the other. And we'll get into a little bit of that.
Yeah, that's the latter. And Montreal, do you speak any French?
Speak French, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, a little Italian.
Whoa.
So if some of you are in maybe South America or the Central America or any Spanish speaking country, I might be able to answer it. I'm pretty fluent, but I can't read or write it, you know.
You know, we'll get into this maybe down the road. We can touch on it now, but I find, so people always ask me, you know, what should I study or what leads to being a good pilot? And there's so many different things. And one that's often overlooked is communication, language, right? Being comfortable, you know, dabbling in different languages and picking up how to say hello and basic conversation, talking on the radio. Communication is a big part of it. We've had students come here. We had a student come in from Indonesia, and while he was here, his English got a lot better, of course. He picked up Spanish. We're in South Florida, Miami area, and even a little bit of Portuguese. He just kind of had an ear for languages.
Yeah, that you know, it'll pay off later on. And
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
right. That is one of the you know, the things that I try to tell people. You know, learn a new language. Just learn. It doesn't
Sure.
matter if you master it. Just do something. Get your mind
Right.
working. Get into that
Absolutely.
mode of learning. You know.
Absolutely. And I guess, you know, yourself being from Montreal, where there's by default multiple languages being spoken, South Florida is multilingual through and through. But around the world, it's just kind of standard. I know I've got Dutch friends that everyone speaks 5, 6 languages. It's just part of the culture.
It is. I mean, growing up, you had to at least speak 3 languages: English, French, and whatever, you know, your native heritage is. So,
Yeah.
I was blessed to have grown up speaking 3 languages, and I thought, you know, growing up that was pretty normal.
Yeah.
So it's a little different here, but back home, everyone spoke at least 3 languages. You know.
Nice. It's tough. I'm working with my kids right now to make sure their Spanish stays strong. So did you end up getting your private with that same flight school? Did you
Oh
go
my
through your
God.
initial training with them?
Oh my God. Yeah. So, you know, being that young, and my parents were totally against this. You know, they said, why would you, you know, them being entrepreneurs and having their own business, that they didn't understand the idea of going to work for somebody else. So there was an uphill battle from the very get-go. Plus the flight school is 3 hours away by bus and train.
Yeah.
And at ground school is on the weekdays. So imagine
Mm.
Mondays and Thursdays after school, I'd be rushing to get out there by 7 p.m. And thank God there was people who lived close by, because I mean, that would mean I'd probably get stuck there because the bus stopped at 9 p.m. and ground school stopped at 10.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, I was very lucky and fortunate to have people that would drop me off close to home at least. But that was I mean, again, going through this initially, paying for flight training, I think it took me over 3 years to get a private pilot. You know?
Sure.
And the weather doesn't help either when it's minus 40.
No, in Montreal it doesn't.
So yeah, it took a little while, but yeah, you know, and it's funny because I keep hearing the excuses. Well, you know, this and that. I mean, we'll go into the struggle a
Yeah.
bit, but I mean,
Yeah. You were hiking through the snow uphill both ways in Montreal.
barefoot. Don't forget barefoot as well.
Yes.
You know, so I made it, and you know, especially starting that young, it was odd that I look back now. I think it's kind of odd that a such a young person would be so driven. But I think some of the motivation was my friends laughing at me, saying, "There's no way in hell." I was
Sure.
not an A student. I mean, quite the opposite on the spectrum, actually. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, aviation is at times a refuge for the guy that wasn't the A student in class, and at the
exactly.
same time, it's something that's very demanding of students. And so I find a lot of those students that come into it thinking like, oh, it's just skills. They just got to build hours. If they get serious by instrument, definitely in their instrument, that's when they're learning to really study. Because if you're studying, I don't know, literature, calculus, something like that, it might not interest you, right? But when
Right.
when you're reading like horsepower and the thrust of jet engines, well, that's interesting. I'll read about that, right? I'll watch some YouTube videos about that.
Yeah.
It turns on different parts of your brain.
Of course, it's the interest, but there's something I just I'm 44 now, and I'm starting to learn how to learn.
Sure.
I've been reading a few books, especially some different business books. There's one by John Quick, I think his name is. It's a really interesting story about him. He was born normal at the age of 5 or 6, hit his head against a heater,
Oh,
had brain damage. They thought
ouch.
he'd be slow, but he has one of the better memories compared to most
Mm.
people. He's learned to learn, and now he's teaching other people how to learn. Speed read, going through a 300-page book in a few hours, and
I want to learn how to speed read. I never picked it up. I thought it was interesting.
it's really interesting because it's not just you're not just reading for the sake of going to read. You're actually picking up information,
Right.
understanding, and putting A and B together. So
Mm.
definitely suggest that book, and that's one of the pillars I'll be really promoting in this mentorship business I'm starting, is really teaching people how to learn, and because
That's a
I
big
think
one.
there's a big deficiency there.
There absolutely is. The private pilot license, for those of you that are already on their way there or just thinking about starting to get their pilot licenses, the private pilot is the great equalizer, right?
Yeah,
People come from all sorts of different backgrounds. You could have a master's degree. I've got a guy right now with a PhD that's starting to fly with us, or you can be a 13-year-old kid or a college dropout that never learned how to study and had too much fun. And the private pilot kind of brings everyone to level. Like you have to meet these standards, FAA or EASA or wherever you might be. And so you've got to learn, right? You've got to learn how to study, put in the time, the physical side of flying, all that. And so it brings these massively different, we call, raw ingredients, students from all around. And by the time they're done with the private, we know where you are, right?
right.
So a lot of people, the vast majority, for those of you that are struggling with your private pilot license, the vast majority of additional training happens at the private pilot level because there's so many variables. And flying is not a natural thing. We weren't born with wings, right? So we have to all kind of crunch through it and struggle through it, and build up the bravery and the guts to go on your cross countries and your solos, and then your instrument. There's much less additional training and almost no additional training at the commercial level because you know how to fly. We're just getting more technical and more in depth. And then once you start going for your type ratings, you can speak to this. You're getting paid. And if you don't pass that check ride, you might not have a job. So you're definitely putting in the effort.
Yeah, and I'll touch something on the private pilot certificate. I think it's probably the hardest, just because it's new. You're
Yeah.
becoming a meteorologist, you're becoming an attorney, a
Yeah.
navigator, a mechanic. I mean, you're learning all these different aspects of flying, and it's all new to you. So obviously, it's a little daunting. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
once you have a good foundation down, and that is the magic word, if.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people I know have gotten through
Sure.
their private, somehow gotten through their instrument, but when it comes to the commercial, that's where the struggle starts. And the CFI, that's the big hurdle, because that foundation wasn't laid down well. So
Absolutely true.
type ratings, whole different ball game. You're right. We are getting paid now, but I remember being in class and after class being at the hotel, and during that time, everyone would be studying everything, and it was bizarre because we didn't know what to study. We just like, what do you study?
Sure.
How the jet
Yeah.
engine works? It's like yes. The answer was yes, but
It's a pile,
now that I've
piles of
gone through
info.
a few type ratings, I know what to really focus on. And again, like I said, 44 years old, learning to learn. So just sharing a lot
So
of that information with all of you soon.
So let's keep going with that. So you start flying at 16, 3 years to get your private pilot license.
Yeah.
Do you continue with that school? Then you graduate, you become
Yes.
a full-time student?
The way it's done is a little different in Canada. For example, after you're private, you actually have to get a night rating. It's a rating.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's a full-on add-on. So I mean, from A to Z, I think it took, well, embarrassed, but at least 10 years. Of course, for the lack of funds.
Sure.
That was the majority of the reasons, but also being so young and having distractions and wanting to have a good time.
Sure.
I finally got out of flying for a little bit, trying to save up money. So I started working in nightlife. I was a DJ, became a promoter, finally bought into a nightclub.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
A whole lifestyle there. Yeah.
a whole different lifestyle, a fun lifestyle though. It was
Sure.
great, but
I can
again,
see you being a promoter. You're an out there guy, shaking hands, saying hi to
that's what it
everybody.
is. That's
Yeah.
all it is. But I mean, it was rough. And then coming to the United States, finding out that I had to do it all over again. There was no conversion. So back in 1999, initially, no, there was nothing. It's like, no, you're gonna have to take every check ride and every written
You have to
test.
do I thought there was like a test and you just can convert it
Yes,
over. That's more recent?
no, what that is that you're getting a certificate based upon another certificate.
Sure. Yes.
So it's not a full-on certificate, which you need to become a commercial pilot, a CFI, and all that stuff. So basically, I was the lucky candidate that got to do it twice. So I always ask people, forgive me for not sympathizing how expensive it is, but you're talking to someone who's done it twice,
And had to beg, borrow, and steal for every hour.
Yeah. I mean, at the early stages during my private, I mean, imagine waking up at 4 a.m. delivering newspapers, because that's going to pay about $200 a month. So you start doing this and various jobs just to go flying once a week. And if it snowed that week or rained, well,
You're out.
tough luck. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you went through to your commercial in Canada and then you came to the
All the
US
way.
and did it all?
go all the way. I even got a multi-engine instrument C.
C license?
I can fly a twin on the water and shoot
Nice.
ILSs. There is an ILS in Canada to a lake. So, I mean, it's bizarre, but
ILS to a lake.
Yeah.
Wow. I got my seaplane rating made 5-6 years ago, Jack Brown's in Winter Haven. Beautiful place. Highly recommend it to anybody. But I never thought of an ILS to a seaplane base. That's interesting.
I don't think it's there anymore, but I remember reading about it, never shot it. It was on the other side of the country, but
Sure.
yeah, it was interesting, and I thought, well, this is it. Now I can get a job. And I did that cross country. We did it with cross country tour. You drive across the whole country, going to every operator, getting on your knees and begging. And they, the answer was, well, I have this applicant who's actually paying me to fly. He's paying to work. So why aren't you offering me some money to go fly? I was like, wait a minute. Okay, I'm done. So that was the whole reason why I moved to the United States.
The pay to fly process. And we've kind of gotten away from that after a few things there. But so you come to the US. Where did you land in the US when you got here?
I initially landed in, I did a little tour of Florida, looking at all the flight schools. I didn't get down south to yours. I honestly thought the whole state of Florida was like Miami, but that was a
whole other country.
Wake up call. Yeah. So ended up at Aviator in Fort Pierce.
Great. Yeah.
And at the time they only had they had one single engine, but mostly it was a twin engine flight school, which was great because got the conversion done. My initial CFI was actually an MEI.
Wow. Okay.
And the Orlando Fizzo did not appreciate that.
No, they've really pushed away from that. Yeah, we used to start with the double I.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That, but I didn't know any better, so I thought that was normal. And then you do your CFI double I add-on after that. And the great thing about it was, after about a year, I left with just under 1,500 hours total, but
really
1,380 multi.
Wow, that's a ton of multi times because they're mostly a multi school. Yeah.
Yeah. So after you get your private and a single, they throw you into a twin, get your private multi, instrument, commercial, and then you'll go add on, your single. Sure. And so you usually left with 90% multi-engine time, which back in early 2000s, it was just unheard of. And I remember going to the interview at SkyWest where I got the job in 2005. when they were looking at the resume, I remember the head of HR said, there seems to be a typo here. You have an extra zero. I go, no, that's exactly what I have. And I know there was
That's
this
funny. That's
awkward
great.
silence, and well,
Oh
let me
no.
call this school because I think you're lying. And she called and said, okay, we need to go visit the school, so
Nice.
interesting.
That is, yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the ATP model where they kind of do almost everything in twins. There's definitely the pros. You end up with that very impressive logbook, but there's also, a significant cost increase to get there. By the way, this is just kind of a funny note. One of your recruits is here in our chat. Chris Mullins calling in from Coconut Creek,
uh-oh.
one of your former colleagues there at SkyWest. I
I don't know
believe
if he
JetBlue
blames
now.
me or no.
You're to blame. But so you instructed there, you built your time there, and
Did,
right
yeah.
into SkyWest.
Right into SkyWest, and it was odd because I remember going to the interview, and they had a great sense of humor. They just play around with you during the whole interview, and I was the first one done, and back then they had so many different steps. They had a written test, a cognitive test, they had a sim evaluation, they had a group like a scenario. They would put you and another applicant in front of a paper tiger, which is basically a mock-up of a cockpit like you see behind me, and
Okay.
they'd give you a scenario and say, okay, you got 7 minutes to come up with a solution. I mean, this was an all-day event, and
Wow.
so I was the first one done, which I was a little nervous being done so quick. And the head of HR called me up. She says, "Yeah, can you gather your belongings and come with us?"
Oh,
With a very stern voice, and brought me into a room and said, it says here you need 2 weeks notice, so we're going to give you your 2 weeks notice. With that tone, and I was thinking, you're hiring me to fire me?
yeah. Which
Really
kind of 2 weeks notice is that?
And then they're like, "No, we're just messing with you. Welcome aboard." I was like, "Oh my god!" They just, But after,
That's
as I'm
great.
walking to get back on the shuttle to get to the airport, I turn on my phone. I had 3 voice messages. I've been offered an interview at the 3 other regionals that day, and
Wow.
I mean, how bizarre is that, right? Nothing for a while, and then when it rains, it pours. So
It does. It
yeah, so
absolutely does. And SkyWest was Wayman Aviation, our flight school's first first regional partner, right? And
yeah,
gosh, I don't even know how many pilots we sent to SkyWest, through you and through Chung, dozens,
yeah.
maybe, upwards of 30, 40 instructors.
I had the opportunity of doing someone's IOE. I was a check airman at SkyWest, which means I'm like an instructor pilot. So when we have a new pilot go through the training program, and then to start your initial operating experience out on the line, like you're actually flying the airplane for real with real passengers. I mean, these are people coming down the jet bridge.
Yeah,
I remember looking at his face, but
yeah, they don't fly
Jordan,
those empty.
yeah, that's what everyone thinks. But you remember Jordan,
Oh,
um,
of course, yeah,
and now
great
he's
guy.
at UPS.
Yes, he just
Yeah,
made that move this year. I saw the photo. That's
so
excellent because I think his father was no, his father was
father's a United pilot.
United, but I think he would always tell me that he wanted to fly cargo.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how I mean, seeing him at your flight school, talking to him over a certain period of time, and help mentoring and answering questions. And I wish I did his interview. That would have been more fun. But seeing him,
Get
walking
to
down
mess
the
around
jet
with him.
bridge with this look like, oh my God, this is for real. Like, oh yeah, this is it. We took some pictures of course, on the
Nice.
ramp, and yeah, it was a fun time, So I'll be sure to send you that picture of him and I in the cockpit.
Yeah. So yeah, I love it. We have the Wayman Palace Lounge for anyone that's interested. It's for students, staff, alumni, or people that are interested in being students. It's a Facebook group, and we put pictures of our alumni. It's kind of fun to see people chiming in that they're flying at, Asian Air, or Korean Air, or now they're off flying in Africa or in Latam or wherever it might be. It's fun
Yeah.
to see where everyone is now after all these years of helping people get there, right? But so you're starting this new project, right? What's it called?
Newhire.net. We already had the website going. It was for a different project back when I was recruiting.
Right.
I remember listening to all you flight school owners saying, "Hey, we need CFIs," and my solution was trying to get all the CFIs from up north to come down during the winter because they're not flying.
Sure.
So I created a website trying to help all you flight schools, because remember that was a promise I made to you guys.
That was a big problem back then, yeah.
I said, we want your CFIs, and we know all you flight school owners are a little nervous about losing your manpower, but hey, I will personally take it upon myself to help you and try to get you some other help from up north. So that was the premise of starting newhire.net. But now after doing, I think we did about 6 meetings down here in South Florida. We try to do one every quarter. And basically we brought in professionals from the aviation world. For example, we had flight school owners. Wayman was down there. Wayman's the flight schools. You and your brother attended on one of them. I think the first one or the second one.
Might have been. I recall that.
So we had flight school owners. We had an aviation doctor. We had the chief pilots of American Airlines there.
Nice.
We had all the nonprofits. They're helping out with scholarships and grants. We even had a company called We Financial.
Yeah, they're great. Alex.
Alex was there, talking about loans and other financial assistance. So it was a one-stop shop for somebody who wanted to learn how to fly. But here was the problem. When you have so many speakers, I think we had 15 at one point, or 15 or 18, but you could only give them 3 minutes to say something.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, or else it'd just go on for days. And that was the one issue we encountered. And the second was we kind of lost track of everybody. So we didn't know what everyone did after leaving. So did they fall through? Did they actually start flying? So we're taking this to an online platform now. There's going to be a lot of accountability, which is a little scary to some.
It is, you're right.
So if you say you want to become a pilot and we give you all the tools and help you out, we expect you to follow through. And you're going to be on this we call an accountability board. Just like at car dealerships, you see all the salesmen. Okay. And it's funny that customers see that, all the top salesmen, how many cars they sold. And usually see that in car dealerships. And the reason why we do that is because if you said you want to become a private pilot by June and we're May 31st, you're not there yet, your name starts flashing and everyone can see that. So we're going to hold you accountable. Okay.
So it's like a structured online based mentorship, right?
Exactly.
Now, I've always seen that as one of here, mentorship is one of our waypoints. Right? We have this whole company philosophy and things that we follow. We created this over years of teaching people how to fly. And mentorship here is number 7. Everyone is a mentor. Aviation has an elusive path. Strive to inspire, right? Because by default, instructors are in a mentorship capacity for their students, whether or not they realize it, right? Students look up to their instructors. And I've seen chains of instructors and their student becomes an instructor. That instructor goes to a SkyWest or a Public and Envoy and their student follows them there. And I've seen chains of 3 or 4 students, instructors kind of go towards this one particular airline or the other. So the mentorship is super important because aviation is elusive. A lot of people are kind of stumbling their way through it. I did a private here, and then I got my instrument rating from an independent instructor, and then I got serious and I joined an academy, and then I kind of sat around for a year.
Right. Yeah. We're basically trying to fill that void that I'm sure, I mean, a lot of the guys and gals that went on to the airlines can look back and say, yeah, I wish somebody was there besides the flight instructor. But maybe I had some other questions I didn't want to ask necessarily to a flight school owner or a CFI. I'm sure I would have loved that, especially going through the hardships of trying to get your license at such a young age. It would have been nice to have someone there taking my hand or basically just give me some encouragement. And actually I think that's what it comes down to at the end. It's motivation.
Yeah. It's that buddy system, someone to check in on you. And I think that's always been one of the beautiful things of like the 99s, of Women in Aviation, of OBAP, is that you're basically assigned a mentor. They have a nice kind of fleshed out mentor system where you have someone who's 5-10 years ahead of you down that career path. And, as you come up to an interview, they tell you, like, this is what to expect. You might want to ask this. Have you researched the people you're applying for or going to school with? There's definitely for an individual student, right? You do this once in your life, right? It's like right now I'm getting impact windows. I'm in Florida, hurricane windows on my house, right? I'm not an expert on hurricane windows, right? I rely on the guy that does it every day to kind of help me figure things out. And I think it's kind of similar, Wayman Aviation, 34 years here in aviation. I've got captains walk around the building with, 10, 20,000 hours We have one of our multi-engine instructors just hit 50 years since he got his private pilot license. And that's a
Wow.
lot of experience to draw on. Like they've seen it, and people are shy to ask for help, right?
Totally. It's interesting. You hit a good point there. And I think it's not only that they're shy; it's they don't know that they don't know. They
They
don't
don't know
know
they
that
can
they need
ask.
help. So we're taking that to a whole different level and a different type of mentorship as well. So I've been posting some motivational videos, for example, and
Okay.
it's only 10 minutes long, and I'm sure you've seen them on YouTube, right? All those motivational videos.
Some great ones out there, yeah.
And the reason why we do this is because there's a lot of people that we're not told they can do this, or we're not told anything positive in their life at all. So they don't even have the belief that they can achieve something. So I just ask 10 minutes a day for every person to maybe listen to something motivational, positive.
Sure.
It's working on the subconscious level. So we're just trying, you know what I mean? We're trying to help from every different angle here, instead of just saying, well, this is what you got to do. This is A, B, and C, and D. Yeah, but that differs person to person. So it's not a one size fits all type of approach, but at least we're trying to fill in the gaps that are missing, that we see are missing,
Sure.
especially when it comes to the self-esteem. It's
That's a big one.
unbelievable.
That's a big one. One of the things that I talk to a lot of our instructors about is about motivation, self-esteem, and momentum. Because when you have a student that has a bad landing, right? Just, they bounced it or whatever it might be, and maybe the instructor had to take the controls, right? When you are secure, you get out of the airplane, you're securing the airplane, everyone's quiet, these students thinking about it, right? Tying down the airplane, students thinking about it, walking back, doing the debrief, students thinking about it. They're driving home, thinking about that bad landing. They're brushing their teeth that night, thinking about that bad landing, right? And tomorrow they might not come back, right?
Yeah.
Because it just kind of ate away at them. And so we talk about feedback and about how it has to be immediate, specific, and private, right? Because the best time to address something like a bad landing is right away, right? Like, okay, you flared high, or maybe you were diving too much. Give that feedback right away so that people can kind of process it, know that they can do something about it, and move on. Every landing is not going to be perfect, right? I was probably well over 100 hours, 200 hours before I felt like I could tell the difference between like a greaser and a decent landing, right? You can always tell when the bad one is. But anything you can walk away from is a good landing, right?
That's right. That's my argument to all the passengers who walk off my flight.
Yeah, right. As they're throwing their coffee cups down the hall. So speaking about mentorship, I'm kind of curious. Did you have a couple of mentors coming up? Someone you looked up to?
Not really.
No, you had the machete at the hack it through yourself.
Yeah, and that's why I think I always was into helping pilots. And that's why I approached you and came to your flight school back 7 years ago. It's because there was nobody like that for me, at that time. And it maybe, and that's just the way it's going to be for a lot of people. You're not going to know pilots, and especially airline pilots or people you aspire to be. You might not know them, but with today's technology, I mean, you can keep rewatching the same YouTube videos of airline pilots, and there you go. There's something at least, and you can post comments, and there's so many groups out there, so there's no excuse anymore. You know what I mean? And I keep hearing that. That's one of the excuses. Well, I don't know anybody. It's like, you're talking to one. Let's get this going.
Yeah.
So I understand. I was the procrastinator. I had 1,000 excuses why I shouldn't go fly today, because I want to go on a date or do something, especially when you're young. And I get that, but today,
sleep in.
Oh yeah, that was the weekend.
That 7 a.m. flight, especially if it's cold out.
Well, if it was a 7 a.m. flight, you gotta remember I'd have to wake up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
To get ready, and hopefully in the bus and the train system wasn't even working on a normal schedule that early on the weekend. So, it was a whole endeavor, So again, I loved. I give this warning out of love, and this is tough love. I go, I've been through worse. I've seen a lot worse. So most of the excuses, and I'm not saying all, but most of the excuses, and they're not reasons, they're just excuses, I really don't have pity for. I smile and go, okay. You
It's
know,
something you're telling yourself. That's not really an excuse.
it's exactly.
Yeah.
And what I try to do, especially what we're trying to do with this whole motivation business that we're starting here, it's really getting rid of those excuses early on,
Good.
and focusing more on the why. Why you want to do this? Why do you want to
Why
wake
is
up at
very
3 in the
important.
morning?
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy. It's going to be rough. This will be probably the hardest thing in your life to do. And let's be honest, but you know, looking back, there's nothing else I would have done.
Speaking about good motivational books, have you ever followed Simon Sinek? Start with Why.
Yes.
Beautiful
Yes.
guy. I've read 3 of his books, followed him a lot. Like, and I went through that process on a long drive from Orlando with my wife. We did it for each other, finding each other's whys, and it was surprisingly very close to what I'm doing. My why ended up being uh, to bring people together to learn through experience, right? And what am I doing? I'm working at a flight school, teaching people from around the world, right, from the experience of in airplanes and flight school. So Simon Sinek, a great one to follow up. But let's kind of come back to our theme here. Um, that transition from SkyWest to American Airlines. That's quite a jump, right?
Wow.
Did that just roll around, or were you
No.
lobbying
You
for
know,
that?
it's funny. Let's see here, back from 2014, I mean, it almost has to become an obsession to
Yeah.
try to get, I mean, you're going from the minors to the majors. That's
Mhm.
what it felt like. I'm not, I don't know much about sports, but I'm just saying, imagine you were in the farm team for so long and you're just like, okay, it's time to take the next step. And you're doing everything possible, I thought, and it was not until I made that decision in 2016, I said, next year, I'm out of here. This is it. This is that moment. I am,
You you drew a
I
line in the
made
sand.
that decision. And from then on, things changed. I became more preoccupied on how to further my career than just my day-to-day job, and I
Mhm.
was looking forward to it. And the motivation came back and the why. And I'll be honest, it wasn't cheap. I've been to when you hear about these big job conferences or job fairs, all the nonprofits put up. I mean, I was buying an airfare ticket to and from, renting a car, hotel, the job for itself, food, drinking. Um, I think and working with 5 different consulting companies, interview prep
Oh,
companies, not 1 or 2, but 5.
you went all
I
in.
think, yeah, oh yeah, I think I spent $20,000 getting this job
Whew.
because there was no
Okay.
turning back. When I said I made that decision, this was it. I didn't spend that 20,000 in one shot. It was, over a certain amount of time, but whatever it took, there was no more excuses. There was no more, well, I see all my friends getting hired. It's just not my turn yet. No, it was do or die. And I think that's
No.
when things changed.
It's that singular focus, that grit. Another great business book that gave me that grit to just keep going at it no matter what the obstacles are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there will be obstacles, especially in flight training. You're gonna run out of money. You're gonna have some bad
Oh my God.
landings, some bad
Oh,
flights, fail a check ride.
oh,
Everything's gonna happen.
oh yeah. And it's interesting. Everyone waits. Like, I gotta make sure I have all this set. No, it'll never happen. There'll always be challenges, let's look at the other side of the spectrum, right? You hear of guys, well, complaining, oh, this person over there, they had all the money, their parents bought everything, and they never had to suffer. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen to this
No,
individual.
it's
You
true.
know, don't. First of all, why are you even worried about the other person? You should be worried about number one. How
Absolutely.
does number
Yeah.
one get to where they want to go instead of
Mhm.
comparing?
Sure.
And that's what's really strange. There's a very, and I notice this, and I get it. Most pilots are type A personality and very competitive, and I understand that. But it's one thing to compete with everyone else versus competing with yourself. You know, so
Sure, absolutely.
so
And you read about those people that kind of have access. I can think of one student way back years ago who had everything possible available for them. Her dad actually owned an airline, right? But it wasn't in her. Like she didn't have that want, that hunger, that grit, to
right,
be there.
right,
Got pretty far along, private instrument pilot, but
yeah.
would prefer to, go off to the beach and kind of get lost for a couple of weeks rather than show up to the flight line at 7 a.m.
I'd love to do that too, right? But I mean, guys, everybody, please. I mean, don't worry about what's going on around the world. Don't worry about this pandemic right now. If you really want to get to where I'm at, And it's weird saying that, because I was on the other side of the fence, but
Mhm.
just focus, just stay focused on what you have to do. Forget about everything else. It's not important, you know. And of course, and I mean that generically. I mean, your family's
Sure.
health and all that's important, but I mean, the distractions are there. There's never been a better time to get lost than there is
Okay.
today, right? With technology. I mean, geez,
Oh, it's so easy. Yeah.
you're being bombarded constantly with what's going on, and of course it piques your interest,
Distractions.
but I mean, you got to make that choice, you know.
So that's on everyone's mind right now is we're coming up on our quarantine anniversary here in about a month. Um,
Wow.
yeah, the airlines. So I've been through a bunch of these panels. I was just on one for the Greater Miami Aviation Association with Delta and JetBlue and a few others, and they're saying that domestic traffic is back to about 70%, which seems pretty darn strong. International still very low. How do
Right.
you see it from your seat, from the cockpit?
You know, flights are full. It's been mind-boggling. There was a time, I think, in April when it was really low,
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
after that, it's we're not flying our normal 100% schedule here. We're flying a fraction of it. But even though the amount of flights are a lot less than what they were pre-COVID, they're pretty busy.
Mhm.
But that'll all change as of, let me just check the date here. As yesterday, sorry, because the
Yeah.
international quarantine, the new policies put into place as of
Oh,
yesterday.
right. Yes,
So
that's the new testing before you come into the US.
testing, yeah,
Yeah.
and quarantining and all this. So I'm curious to see how things will play out in the next few weeks. But I'm sure the numbers have lowered dramatically,
Mhm.
especially with everyone trying to get away for a little getaway here and there to Mexico or
Yeah.
to the islands. I mean, now all that is out the window. So we'll see how all that has changed the
Mhm.
industry. And I get this. I'm sure everyone asks this all the time. It's when will things get back to normal? And that's nobody really knows.
It's
And
gonna be different. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you listen to everyone on the media in the media, and of course, depending who you're listening to, you'll people in the financial sector are always like, yeah, it should come back tomorrow, you know, because
That'd be great.
they want the stocks to go up, right?
Sure.
Of all the
Yeah.
companies. But the reality is, and this is just my opinion. I talk to a lot of people in my neighborhood, and I live in a pretty middle class neighborhood. Just asking my neighbors, so when this is all over, and this is what I would ask them during my walks. I would just ask them, do you think are you going to go on vacation right after this? And they look at me like, and this is the scary reality. It's like we haven't paid our mortgage in 9 months. We're
A lot of
behind
people
on
hurting.
car payments. Yeah, so the middle class, I think, really took a big beating. And I know everyone wants to be optimistic with the fly. Everyone's going to, everyone's saying there's a pent up demand. There's a pent up demand. Yeah, for some people,
To
for
some
a
extent.
small sector of society, but a lot of people just
Mm,
are hurting, are hurting real bad, and they're not
I
worried
agree.
about going on vacation right now. You know?
I think your vacations are probably when, let's say, there's a good amount of vaccines, and let's say by this summer, it's relatively safe to travel. And airlines by far are because of the HERPA filters and all that, are a very safe way to travel right now. Everyone's in masks, and thank goodness they're enforcing that. But I think the vast majority of traveling is going to be going to go see that parent, that brother, sister that lives in another state that you haven't seen in a year.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be, for some people, it's going to be going to Vegas and hitting the poker
Yeah.
table. But for I think
Of
the vast
course.
majority of people, it's going to be visiting grandma in Cleveland
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
things like that, right? That's probably where that first vacation travel is going to come by.
Right.
Now, pretty early on, and I revisited this recently. Kit Darby is an aviation consultant and did
Yeah.
these wonderful graphs, kind of figuring out when and how things are going to come back. And I actually revisited them yesterday because I'm preparing for a presentation for Peru this Saturday. If
Okay.
anyone's in Peru, we're going to be doing a seminar for our Peruvian students on
You're going this
Saturday.
Saturday?
Oh, not this Saturday, just virtual Zoom, right?
Oh, okay. I thought
Yeah,
'cause I'm
yeah.
actually
No,
going there.
I should ride with you then.
No.
But so I went back to visit the grass, and they've surprisingly been very accurate, right? Like he predicted 70, like he said his U curve would be 75%. Domestically, we're looking at 60 to 70%, right? So I was actually very impressed by how accurate he was to it. And for those of you that are thinking about starting your flying full time, right now, if you came here today and flew your first hour of flying, the program is 1 to 2 years, right? For most full-time students to get to their commercial license, then you're going to probably become an instructor and fly another year after that, right? So his hiring trend has the furlough being recovered and now hiring to replace retired pilots about 12 to 18 months out, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean, there's never going to be a perfect time, but perfection is the enemy of getting stuff done, right? So if you want to be a pilot, you just have to start, right? You've got to start taking those first flights, going for your next written test if you kind of took a pause from it, because the tea leaves tell us that about 18 months or so is when we're going to be back to like a more normalized kind of hiring trend and upswing.
Oh, definitely. There was I got bits and parts of it the other day, but I think United Airlines put on a webinar about their Aviate program and when they expect to be hiring again. I know people here in American have been speaking about it, and I'm on the recruiting team. I'm one of the interviewers for American, and we're anxious to get back interviewing pilot candidates. And the big push is not only when things return to normal, but everyone keeps forgetting the amount of pilots that are retiring in the next few years. Massive numbers, and it's
close to
almost
1,000 took early retirement just from American Airlines, right?
Yeah, we had about 1,000, and I'm sure Delta had just about the same, and United maybe not as much, but we're all looking to hire some big amount of pilots in the next 4 or 5 years. So, that's just for retirements. That's not growth. That's not any changes besides the scope and numbers. So, I mean, people keep asking me, and I know there's a lot of people who said, I'm gonna take a little step back from flying because I want to wait this out. And again, like I said, you can't wait any. You got to do it. You got to get through it. Go through. It's not when it's a good time you should start flying. You should have already been ready.
It's true.
When things start ramping up, it's when you want to be there with your resume in hand, ready to apply for that position instead of, well, I'm going to start now, and be ready later on. But that's kind of counterproductive. So.
It's a timing and preparation, is what you need to be ready when the opportunity strikes. God.
Everyone just
bought
himself a year or two.
Yeah.
Your competition, you're all in the same boat here. So get it done now.
Yeah, absolutely. And those of you, if you're on a furlough or if you're waiting for things to open up, like get out there and volunteer, right? Join an OBAP, your local EAA chapter, give kids discovery flights, go to your flight school and just hang out and give your time. Because if you're able to keep current and in this year you're able to add on 100 hours, 200 hours, that's a lot better than the guy that just sat home and decided to get a job at Starbucks, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting you touched that point. A lot of people have asked me about volunteering. And one person actually made a comment, said, I'm going to start volunteering a few months before I start applying to the airlines. You really don't think they'll see right through that?
That's quite how it works.
It's like you're going to put the date of when you started volunteering. And believe it or not, sometimes they will call. They'll verify if you really did.
Really?
But starting to volunteer a week before you send out an application, it's not really genuine.
No, it's not.
Everyone can see that, so.
Well, Steven, the conversation has been really captivating. We're almost up with time, and there's questions. There's questions all around. So let me grab a few. Let's see. Someone that wants to do their 0 to commercial in Russian, right? I suggest you go to flight school in Russia, right? Because English is the de facto language of international aviation, right? If you're gonna do your flight training in Russian, you'll probably be a pilot within domestic Russia. Right? It's the same thing that I tell students coming from South America. If you do ground school or flight training in general in Spanish, you're probably going to be within South America, right? But if you want to be that long haul pilot flying to JFK or Paris or whatever, you have to know English. It's the language of aviation.
I remember there's somebody that I know that owns a flight school up here close to where I live, and he had a couple of Colombian students, and it's interesting, we talk, and I talk to them in Spanish, and I go, how's your English coming along? They're like, well, it's really not. And I keep asking them, and first of all, they only hung around each other.
Yes, that's a big problem.
Right? So they would just talk Spanish all day to each other. They wouldn't grow and go out and speak English. And I said, you guys are all young, single, good-looking men. Why don't you go and meet some nice local women here, and that'll, there's an answer to getting your English going. And there's ways, but it's strange how and I get it. I'm sure if I went to some other country and I heard English, I'd want to stay amongst the people. You know what I mean? Instead
Sure.
of
Yeah,
wanting to
that
venture out on your own, but you
yeah,
gotta grow
expat.
and gotta learn English. And talking. And my wife is a ex Avianca flight attendant, and I got to meet a lot of Avianca pilots when I'd commute down and hang out with them. And it's interesting. Yeah, they all spoke English, and
Sure.
not very basic. No, they actually conversed and can hold a good conversation. So I
Absolutely.
mean, that's what it'll take, and I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's how can a German pilot take off from Berlin, land in Tokyo, right, with all that airspace in between because everyone's speaking English,
Right.
right? So it's very important from traffic controllers and on up. There's a series of things here, questions about hiring for foreign pilots, citizenship, scholarships, things like that. I mean, my note on this is aviation is an international career, right? The US license, worldwide recognized, EASA license recognized around the world, but you go where the work is. I can't tell you how many pilots I know from Colombia that are flying for Emirates
Yep.
or all over. So don't get set on working in the US, right? Just like most countries, there's a lot of residency citizenship requirements. You have to be legal to work in the US, right? But
Exactly.
being a pilot might qualify you in many countries.
Yep.
Yeah,
A
I
lot of
remember
great
we.
contract work out there,
Oh yeah, lots of
paying
contract work.
big bucks.
Mhm.
But you got to get ready to be able to be a little bit more flexible and be ready to leave.
So I think you might want to take this one. It's what are the minimum requirements that must be met by a high school student to join a flight school? I know these, but I'm kind of thinking about you at 16 joining a
Wow.
flight school.
Thank God there wasn't really anything at the time, because I probably wouldn't have been accepted into any flight school. But again, what are the requirements? Well, there might not be any regulatory requirements, but I mean, looking back, I mean, high school was easy.
Oh yeah.
That was easy. If try to just go through the motions, get it done. Get
Mhm.
get some decent grades. Um, I've been asked this many times by family members, by parents, especially. Do our
Sure.
kids need to be physics majors or math majors? I'm like, geez, thank
Well,
God,
that's
no, because
nice. But,
I can count to this. That's how and if there was bigger numbers, I think we'd all be in trouble. But so
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the academic side. Do your best, because what it is, it shows the later on for your interview and your job prospects. It'll show you how serious you took every part of your education, and that kind of reflects on what type of person you are and how easy it is to train you as an individual. So, obviously, the better the grades, better chance. It's a couple more points for you. You know,
Mm. Absolutely. So, I mean, the only actual requirement in the regulations is in the U.S. 16 to solo, 17 to get your private pilot license, 18 to get your commercial license. And if you're young and you're watching this and you're clearly passionate, look into gliders. You can solo at 14, right? Our youngest student was 13, and he would fly, like every 2-3 weeks, kind of come and go, me a little bit more in the summer. And solo when he was 16, guidelines when he was 17. He's actually an instructor with us that just hit 1,300 hours, and he has the
and
early
he's how old?
ATP. What's that?
He's how old?
Oh well, now he's got to be. I'd probably put him at 21,
Wow,
2021. Yeah, he's there.
unbelievable.
You have to be 23 for an ATP certificate. So
Yeah.
yeah, he's well ahead of the curve, well ahead of the curve. So yeah, start early. I remember, so my brother and I had the privilege to be flying when we were young, and I remember him, my brother, taking up the high school photographer, and we had photos of the high school in the yearbook, right? I bet you nobody else in the high school was able to do that. So it's a great thing if you have that clarity of sight that this is what you want to do at an early age, because a lot of us go into second careers and then aviation is your second, third career. You're like, well, I'm tired of sitting in a cubicle. I want to come back to it. Right. And those are wonderful. We've had architects and engineers and lots of accountants, decide they would rather be pilots. And they're all, very nice for now. Some of them went with you to SkyWest. Some of them are flying corporate, flying Gulfstreams and Embraers. There's a whole nother part of the industry that is doing really strong right now. Private aviation is doing very well. And sometimes you get more modern equipment than at the airlines, right? That new
Oh yeah.
Gulfstream.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. I don't think we can even compare. I mean, we're flying 1980s technology and the newest Airbuses are still based on old technology, where the corporate jets now, God, it's a little scary. They don't really need pilots anymore, right? They just
Yeah.
press go and land, and
Those Phenoms, ERJs,
oh gosh,
beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful airplanes. So we're kind of coming to the end of our time. Maybe would you leave us with some closing words, and then how people can reach you and your new newhire.net?
Yeah, newhire.net. It's not. I mean, there's a page up right now that's just kind of like the template of what it's going to look like. Um, I don't have an email up for it yet, but you're more than welcome. This is an old email I for my flying. It's Steven. This is all going to be one word. Steven Yoo pilot at hotmail.com. So Steven with a V, YOO pilot at hotmail.com. And that's I suggest everyone make a very simple, basic email instead of all these cool like number one flyer,
Yeah.
especially for your airline applications later on. So it doesn't get mixed with all your other emails. So just one for flying and maybe one for just for the job prospects. I see a couple of questions here. I just want to get to,
Sure.
and I'm sure people have been waiting. So, what do you think of the Corona aviation market?
Yeah, we talked about that.
Recruitment, I think it's starting to start to open up again. I know some of the regionals are starting to hire pretty soon here. I think PSA is one of the companies that's hiring. One of the majors,
You did?
United, will be hiring, I think, at the end of this year. So that'll create some movement. This is an interesting question. I get this actually a lot, especially with the flight schools back in the recruiting days from all the international students. Do you think airlines will hire international pilots to fly in the U.S.? Wow, things will have to be pretty bad on the recruitment side for domestic pilots, because they have to give and prove that there are no more domestic pilots for them to hire. Now, I know some airlines had some agreements with some foreign nationals, especially Australian. SkyWest had something with some Australian pilots. I really didn't know the details of it, but this is going to be it's especially with the 2 years that the year right now that's passed, but there wasn't really much hiring, so that gave that incubation time for a lot of pilots to get their hours and experience up. So when things do open up, there'll be a big amount of pilots ready to take those positions. So I really don't see them hiring internationally for a while.
Well, that question is why I mentioned earlier that really being a pilot is an international job. You go where the jobs are, right? And you might not be based in the U.S. You might be based out of Amsterdam, or you might be based out of Dubai or Seoul. I've known a lot of people. I have this old instructor of ours. I think he was originally from Connecticut. We met him here in South Florida. Fast forward 10 years later, he's got two little blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids. He'd spent the last 6 years in Korea. They spoke fluent Korean, right? And he was moving back to the U.S. So you just go where the jobs are as a pilot, right? You can make great money overseas.
There's an interesting question here, George Calanya.
Sure.
Jorge Calanya. Would you recommend waiting to flow from regional to American or going to a budget carrier? That's up to you. The flow is a 100% guaranteed job at American. There's no interview.
Nice.
If you want to take your chances, go to a budget carrier. That's great too. But just understand, you might not move from that. If you upgrade to the left seat and you're making over 200,000 a year, why would you leave?
True. I know a lot of people right now that are Atlas, the cargo side is going strong, and they've been picking up a ton of pilots, right? And you go straight into some heavy metal. I know a 27-year-old former student of ours that's flying a 747 in Japan right now.
Yeah.
Right? It's amazing.
How cool. That's amazing. So there's an interesting question here from, I didn't have the name. It says a 42 starting an instrument, going full time with no loans. Do you think I should stick to the regional or a career and go to the majors? Wow. Okay. Well, let me give you this analogy. Or not analogy. I'll just tell you. You could. I remember hearing this saying not too long ago. This is interesting. You can aim for the stars and fall flat in your face into the mud, or you can aim for the mud and fall in it. It's up to you.
Sure.
What do you want? What do you really want out of this? I would obviously aim for the biggest and best. Whatever dream was. Go for it.
Yeah.
Don't settle. Don't start changing your desires just based upon your age. 42. You still got 23 years of service.
Oh yeah.
Why even stop there? So
23 years of service with the airlines, but then there's still the entire private executive jet field. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
like I know a lot of guys that were flying long haul and now they're flying a global. Global can get you, halfway around the world. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing stuff.
Can you
Yeah.
really make good money in 23 years with new pay skills? Uh, okay, let's get something straight. If you want to become a millionaire, you do not become an airline pilot, and that's just reality. You better have some side hustles going, some side businesses.
Seems like
Never,
every captain has a side hustle.
yeah. I don't. I mean, I'm just saying. I don't rely. I'm working hard with my wife right now to not rely on our salary from American Airlines.
Hmm.
Two businesses during the pandemic. That's what we started up, and we're not looking back. And you should too. I think everyone should.
Yeah.
You know, can you make some really good money? Well, okay. Well, define good money. Yes, you can make
Oh
over
yeah.
six figures. Is that
That's
good?
good money.
So some people that's great money. Some people that's a bad month. I don't know. You know,
Well, I
choose your
like
tribe
that.
wisely, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you can. I would
Well,
definitely aim for it.
Well, I'm sure the questions won't stop, and we could have dove into any of those topics, mentorship, interviews, any of those, and probably done an entire episode. So we're definitely have to kind of maybe revisit this again in a couple of months, have you back
Yeah,
on.
oh,
So
definitely.
everyone, please reach out to Captain Steven Yoo with his upcoming newhires.net. Visit us, Wayman Aviation and wayman.edu, hashtag fly Wayman or at Wayman Aviation on all the social media channels. This video will be immediately available on Facebook at Wayman Aviation, and it'll be on YouTube probably in a week or two. And I look forward to seeing all your comments on those posts. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Captain Steven Yoo.
It's a pleasure. It was fun. We'll do it again soon.